On Sunday, at least 8 Israeli missiles struck a tent camp in Rafah.
Have you ever felt like, no matter what you do, bad things just keep happening to you? Like the whole world is against you? Well, imagine being from this place. A tiny strip of land, home to millions of people. For as long as anyone can remember, violence and destruction have rained down on these citizens again and again and again. Bombs, bullets, tanks, you name it. First it was the Egyptians attacking, then the Greeks, the Romans, the Muslims, the Crusaders. Everybody wanted a piece of this place. For many years, there have been many wars and fights. Israel and its neighbors have been fighting a lot, and Gaza is stuck in the middle of it all. Families have been forced to leave their homes, and children grow up seeing broken buildings and hurt people. Literally, the people here have experienced so much.
We begin today's show in Gaza, where health officials say at least 46 people were killed in more than a 24 hours as Israel continues to bomb Rafah after its forces on...
Just one day after an Israeli attack killed 45 people in a camp in Rafah in southern Gaza.
Amazingly, there have been 19 big attacks on this small area over the years. Each time, the people's lives are turned upside down. But the amazing thing is that they always get back up. They clean up the mess and keep going, no matter what. So what's so special about this place that makes everyone want to fight over it so badly? Why does the violence and hatred never stop? Could it be the location, the resources, or something deeper? An ancient conflict that has raged for millennia? Today, we're going through the 18 times when the Rafah Gaza keeps getting attacked over and over again. Don't go anywhere. We're going to show you the entire crazy history of how these places became the unluckiest spots in the whole world. Number 1, Philistine settlements, around 1200 BC. A long, long time ago, there was a group of people called the Philistines. They lived in an area that had 5 main towns or cities. One of these towns was Gaza. The Philistines made their homes in Gaza and the other 4 towns nearby. They lived simple lives, working hard as farmers and tradesmen. However, the Philistines had very powerful neighbors. 2 big, mighty civilizations wanted the lands the Philistines lived on, the Egyptians and the Israelites. The Egyptians were a huge empire with strong armies and weapons. The Israelites were another group that wanted to settle in that area too. Both the Egyptians and Israelites looked at the humble Philistine towns like Gaza and thought, "We want that land for ourselves." So the big armies from Egypt and Israel started attacking and trying to capture the little Philistine cities one by one. Tiny Gaza was very outnumbered. The Philistine people fought as hard as they could with the basic weapons they had. But against the mighty Egyptian and Israeli forces, they didn't stand much of a chance. It was like a pair of giants picking on 5 little kids who couldn't defend themselves properly. No matter how bravely the Philistines battled, their towns kept getting smashed and captured over and over again. Poor Gaza suffered the worst. It got battered from attackers on 2 sides, the Egyptians and the Israelites. The Philistine people there must have been so scared and heartbroken to see their homes get wrecked constantly. But this was just the very start of Gaza's troubles. Number 2, Assyrian and Babylonian attacks, 800 BC, 600 BC. For a very long time after the Philistines, Gaza stayed a peaceful little town. The people there could finally live calmly without invasions for hundreds of years. But then, 2 new big bullies showed up, the Assyrians and the Babylonians. The Assyrians and Babylonians were mighty warrior kingdoms. They had huge, powerful armies with strong weapons like swords, spears, and battering rams. These 2 bullies wanted to control the entire Middle East region. Wherever they went, they would force cities and towns to follow their rules. Anyone who disobeyed got invaded and smashed. First, the Assyrian armies came marching in. With their massive force, they easily overpowered Little Gaza and made it part of their empire. For over 100 years, the people of Gaza had to obey the strict Assyrian laws and pay heavy taxes. If they didn't, the Assyrian bullies would punish them badly. Number 3, Persian Rulers, 539 BC, 332 BC. After being crushed by the Assyrians and Babylonians for so many years, you'd think poor little Gaza could finally catch a break. But no. Next came an even bigger bully called the Persian Empire. The Persians were richer and stronger than anyone Gaza had faced before. The Persians made Gaza into one of their important centers for controlling the whole region. Lots of Persian rulers and officials moved in and treated Gaza like their property. To make matters worse, the Persians got into fights with another group called the Greeks every few years. Whichever side won their battle, the devastation happened in Gaza. Big Greek and Persian armies would arrive and wage bloody war right through the streets of Gaza. The civilians there had to frantically try to stay alive as their town kept getting smashed. Number 4, Alexander the Great attacks, 332 BC. For a long time, the Persian bullies had been fighting with the Greeks over control of lands like Gaza. This brought constant battles and misery to the people living there. Then, a mega warrior king from Greece named Alexander the Great arrived with his massive army. Alexander was on a rampage to conquer the entire Persian Empire. When Alexander reached Gaza, he ordered the town to surrender to him immediately. But the people of Gaza had faced one bully after another for so long. They didn't want to listen to Alexander too. So, in a huge act of bravery, the people of tiny Gaza decided to stand up and fight against Alexander's mighty Greek forces. They fortified their city walls and readied their basic weapons. Sadly, Gaza's bravery was no match for Alexander's power and skill. After a fierce battle, his troops smashed through Gaza's defenses with their strong swords, spears, and battering rams. Poor Gaza was captured and looted by the unstoppable Alexander. He didn't even let the people living there surrender peacefully. That's how determined he was. Alexander totally flattened and wrecked Gaza, showing no mercy at all. It was like a brutal giant showing those cheeky little people who was boss. Number 5, 167 BC, 63 BC. For the next few centuries, Gaza remained under control of different bullying rulers who were incredibly harsh and cruel. First, a dynasty called the Hasmoneans from Judea conquered Gaza. They forced the people there to follow their rules and pay loads of heavy taxes. If anyone in Gaza broke a single rule or couldn't pay the steep taxes, the Hasmonean forces would brutally punish and crush them without mercy. Number 6, Roman Conquest, 63 BCE. Then in 63 BC, the Roman Empire rolled in as the next set of bullies taking over Gaza. The Romans were famous for their advanced armies and incredibly strict laws. A powerful Roman general named Pompey marched into Gaza and simply announced, "You are all under Roman control now, or else." The scared, exhausted people of Gaza knew better than to defy the mighty Roman legions after being bullied for so long. They surrendered immediately. For many decades under Roman occupation, the people of Gaza lived in fear, misery, and poverty as Roman governors heavily taxed and persecuted them. Number 7, Muslin Conquerors, 600s AD. Just when it seemed the brutality could not possibly get any worse for Gaza, a new wave of conquerors and bullies arrived, the Muslim Arab forces. In the 600s AD, a massive Arab-Muslim empire called the Rashidun Caliphate was rapidly expanding across the Middle East, seizing land by force. Their powerful armies, led by a general named Amr ibn al-As, quickly overwhelmed and captured both Gaza City and the nearby village of Rafah. Like before, the people of these lands were given a harsh choice by the invaders. Either embrace the Muslim religion and Arab culture, or face total destruction. Most people in Gaza reluctantly chose to convert to Islam to avoid bloodshed. But even then, they remained impoverished and oppressed under their new Arab-Muslim rulers. Number 8, the Crusades, 1000s to 1200s. For the next 600 years, the people of Gaza and Rafah endured one long, continuous nightmare. getting caught in the middle of the infamous Crusades. During this period, Christian European forces calling themselves Crusaders continuously invaded and battled the Muslim rulers to try capturing the Holy Lands. Crusader and Muslim armies would clash and fight ferociously, using Gaza and Rafah as their battlegrounds over and over again without end. First, the Crusaders would seize control of the two cities through bloody violence and warfare. Then the Muslims would regroup, counterattack, and retake Gaza. This cycle of invasions and occupations kept repeating for centuries. No matter who was in power at any given time, the civilians were the ones suffering the terrible consequences. Number 9. Napoleon's invasion, 1799. For a very long time after the brutal Crusades, things were relatively calm and peaceful in Gaza and the nearby Rafah village. The people were finally able to live without constant warfare for a while. But then in 1799, a new powerful foreign invader arrived, Napoleon Bonaparte from France. Napoleon was a famous military leader who was trying to conquer lands across North Africa and the Middle East. When Napoleon's huge army marched through the Gaza region, he simply expected the people to surrender to his forces immediately. After over 1,000 years of being bullied by one conqueror after another, Gaza's people were exhausted. This time, with no strength left to fight back, the civilians in Gaza and Rafah had to just accept Napoleon's occupation forces controlling their towns and homes. It was an uneasy time as the French troops looted and disrupted their lives. Luckily for Gaza and Rafah, Napoleon's campaign started failing after a few years. His forces ended up withdrawing from the area, bringing some temporary relief. Number 10. World War I, 1917 to 1918. However, that peace did not last very long at all. In 1917, a deadly new conflict engulfed Gaza and Rafah. World War I. During this massive global war, two huge military powers, Britain and the Ottoman Empire, decided to fight a series of major battles right through the streets of Gaza. First came the Battle of Gaza in March 1917, as British infantry regiments furiously tried capturing the city from the Ottoman Turkish forces defending it. Bombs and bullets destroyed homes everywhere. A few months later in April, the Second Battle of Gaza erupted as the British troops renewed their ferocious offensive against the Ottomans. Civilians desperately fled the city in terror. Then in November 1917, Gaza became a war zone once again during the Third Battle as Britain's soldiers made one final push to seize the battered, rubble-strewn city. After years of bitter fighting and bombardment, the mighty British Empire finally claimed victory and forced the Ottomans out of Gaza. But the city's people paid a horrendous price in death and devastation. Number 11. More turmoil, 1948, 1970s. Just a few decades later in 1948, another explosion of violence struck Gaza, the Arab-Israeli war over the creation of the new state of Israel. Gaza became a major battlefield and refuge as Arab Palestinians fled the fighting or got expelled from areas that became Israel. Tens of thousands crowded into the small, overwhelmed territories. In 1948, a big war broke out over the creation of Israel. Gaza became a major battlefield. Many Palestinian Arabs fled to Gaza to escape the fighting or were forced out of their homes that became part of Israel. This made Gaza very crowded and tense as people tried to find safety. Number 12. The 1956 Suez Crisis. In 1956, another conflict erupted known as the Suez Crisis. This time, Israeli forces temporarily took control of Gaza. The fighting was intense, and the people of Gaza were caught in the middle. Once again, their homes and lives were disrupted. Number 13. The 1967 Six-Day War. Just over a decade later, in 1967, another war broke out, called the Six-Day War. Israel captured Gaza from Egypt and began a long military occupation. This meant that Israeli soldiers were in control of Gaza, and the people there faced a lot of hardships. Number 14. The War of Attrition, 1967 to 1970. From 1967 to 1970, there were periodic skirmishes between Israeli and Egyptian forces, affecting Gaza. The fighting wasn't constant, but it flared up often enough to keep the people of Gaza living in fear and uncertainty. Number 15. The 1982 Israeli Withdrawal from Sinai. In 1982, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty, and Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula. However, Israel kept control of Gaza until 2005. This meant that while there was some peace, the people of Gaza were still living under Israeli control for many more years. Number 16. Intifada Uprisings, 1987 to 2005. Fed up with continuous oppressive Israeli military occupation, Palestinian activists and civilians in Gaza ultimately rose up in defiance during the late 1900s. In 1987, the First Intifada began, a widespread uprising and revolt across Gaza that soon spread to the West Bank. Using civil disobedience, strikes, and some violence, Palestinians demanded freedom and human rights. While the First Intifada eventually wound down after international pressure, a far more violent and bloody Second Intifada erupted in 2000, centered largely around Gaza once more. This time, there was severe fighting between Palestinian militants and the powerful Israeli army. Suicide bombings, airstrikes, and horrific civilian casualties rocked Gaza for 5 years until 2005. Number 17. Modern Devastating Wars, 2008. Unfortunately, even after Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, the violence and suffering has been unable to stop for this tormented strip of land. In 2008 to 2009, a devastating military conflict known as the Gaza War broke out between Israel and the militant Palestinian group Hamas, who had taken control of Gaza. In what Israel codenamed Operation Cast Lead, the advanced Israeli military rained down a relentless bombardment of airstrikes and artillery on Gaza while Hamas fighters fought back with crude rockets. Over 1,000 Palestinian civilians perished in the cities. This cycle of bloodshed has tragically continued repeating every few years, with Israel launching major offensives like Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012, Operation Protective Edge in 2014, and Operation Guardian of the Walls in 2021. Each time, Gaza's people find themselves simply trying to take shelter as powerful military forces relentlessly pound their neighborhoods into rubble and destruction once again. So, that's for today's viewers. These are the times when Rafah, Gaza has been attacked by the other countries brutally, but guess what? Still they are standing against it and fighting for their country. I hope the video will provide you with important insight that will help you for your further growth. But for now, I'm going to meet you in the very next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Bye.